The Shield is back. Seth Rollins sends heartfelt messages to Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose after his shocking return. This is the most emotional and nostalgic moment in WWE history. Seth Rollins just made a shocking return to WWE and immediately sent heartfelt messages to both Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose about reuniting the Shield, and I am absolutely torn between being overwhelmed with emotion at the possibility of seeing these three brothers back together versus being furious that WWE might be using our nostalgia and love for the Shield to distract from their inability to create new stars and compelling current storylines. What makes this even more complicated is that Seth's messages weren't just generic "let's team up" statements. They were deeply personal acknowledgments of everything the Shield accomplished together, everything that went wrong when they broke up, and Seth's apparent regret about being the one who destroyed the Brotherhood in the first place with his infamous betrayal. I'm crying at the thought of seeing the Shield reunite after all these years of drama and separation. I'm concerned that WWE will ruin this reunion like they've ruined so many other nostalgic moments, and I'm about to break down every single word of Seth's emotional messages, explain why a Shield reunion now makes perfect sense or represents WWE's creative bankruptcy, analyze whether Roman and Dean will actually respond to Seth's olive branch or if past wounds are too deep to heal, reveal what this means for each man's individual character development, and expose whether this is WWE's most brilliant use of history and emotion or the most cynical exploitation of fan nostalgia that proves they've run out of original ideas. Let me describe Seth Rollins' shocking return and his emotional messages because every word, every pause, every facial expression tells the story of a man who's carried guilt for a decade. Seth's return happened during a chaotic segment, maybe a multi-person brawl or a moment when WWE seemed in complete chaos and Seth's music hit, causing an eruption from the crowd who hadn't seen the Architect in weeks or months. Seth came out looking different than we're used to seeing him. Not in his flashy ring gear, not with his confident swagger. He was wearing simple street clothes, and his demeanor was vulnerable in a way we rarely see from Seth Rollins. He grabbed a microphone and his voice was shaking with emotion from the first word. "I didn't plan to come out here tonight. I wasn't scheduled for this show. But I was sitting in the back watching everything fall apart, watching WWE descend into chaos, and I realized something that I should have realized years ago. I can't do this alone. I was never supposed to do this alone. When the Shield was together, we were unstoppable. We changed WWE. We changed wrestling. And then I destroyed it all." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. This wasn't a typical wrestling promo. This was confession, therapy, vulnerability that you almost never see in WWE's heavily scripted environment. Seth continued, his voice breaking. "Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, the head of the table, my brother. I know things haven't been the same between us since I hit you with that chair at the Money in the Bank ladder 10 years ago. I know I broke your trust. I know I broke our trust. But Roman, I need you to know that I think about that moment every single day. The biggest regret of my career, of my life, is destroying the Shield. And if there's any chance that you could forgive me, that we could stand together one more time, I'm here. I'm ready. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Then Seth turned his attention to Dean Ambrose, or John Moxley, or whatever you're calling yourself now. The lunatic fringe. The wild card. The brother who kept us grounded when Roman and I got too caught up in our own egos. "Dean, I know you left WWE partly because of the politics, partly because of the creative direction, but I also know that some of it was because of me. Because I made the Shield toxic with my betrayal. Because I made it impossible for the three of us to ever fully trust each other again. But Dean, if you're watching this, wherever you are, we need you. WWE needs you. I need you. Come home. Let's finish what we started." The crowd was chanting "Shield. Shield. Shield," with tears in their eyes. This wasn't just a call-out for a reunion. This was Seth Rollins apologizing for a decade-old decision and begging his brothers to give him another chance. Let me ask you right now in the comments, is Seth Rollins' apology and Shield reunion plea genuine and emotional, or is this just WWE manipulating fan nostalgia for ratings? Because this question determines whether this moment is sacred or cynical. Now let's talk about the history between these three men, because understanding their complicated past is crucial to determining whether a Shield reunion makes sense or would feel forced. The Shield debuted in 2012 and immediately became the most dominant faction in WWE. Roman, Seth, and Dean were brothers in every sense that mattered. They had each other's backs, they won together, they changed the wrestling landscape together. Then in 2014, Seth committed the ultimate betrayal. He turned on Roman and Dean, hitting them with chairs and aligning with the Authority. That moment is still considered one of the most shocking betrayals in WWE history. The pain on Roman and Dean's faces felt real because the bond between the Shield members had seemed unbreakable. Since then, the three have had complicated relationships. They've teamed up occasionally for one-off reunions or against common enemies, but those moments always felt temporary rather than like the true brotherhood the Shield represented originally. There's always been an undercurrent of tension, of unresolved hurt from Seth's betrayal that never fully healed. Roman became the tribal chief, building the bloodline and establishing himself as WWE's top star without needing Seth or Dean. Dean left WWE entirely, becoming Jon Moxley and building an incredible career in AEW and the independent scene, proving he didn't need WWE or the Shield to be successful. And Seth has been the visionary, creating his own factions and identity separate from his Shield past. All three men have evolved beyond the Shield. They've proven they can succeed individually. So the question becomes, do they need each other anymore, or would reuniting be regression rather than progression? Are they better as individuals who occasionally reference their shared history, or should they recapture what made them special together even if it means potentially limiting their individual character development? That's the fundamental tension in Seth's plea for reunion. Is he asking Roman and Dean to move forward together, or is he asking them to go backward to a time when they were younger, hungrier, and hadn't yet discovered who they could be as individuals? Trivia question for the Wrestling Newsletter family: what was the exact date when the Shield made their WWE debut, and which three wrestlers did they attack during their first appearance? Let's see who remembers Shield history perfectly. Here's what makes me absolutely emotional about Seth's messages: the acknowledgement of his guilt and the vulnerability of publicly apologizing feels so rare in modern WWE, where characters rarely show genuine regret for their actions. Seth didn't make excuses. He didn't say, "It was just business," or "I had to do what was best for my career." He said, "I was wrong, I regret it, and I'm sorry." That kind of emotional honesty is what makes wrestling powerful when it's done right. It taps into real human experiences: the pain of betraying people you love, the difficulty of apologizing for old mistakes, the hope for forgiveness and reconciliation even when you know you might not deserve it. Everyone watching has either been Seth, the person who hurt someone and wants forgiveness, or been Roman/Dean, the person who was hurt and has to decide whether to forgive. Seth's vulnerability also makes him more relatable as a character. For years, Seth has been this confident, sometimes arrogant performer who seemed unshakable. But this moment showed that underneath all that swagger is someone who carries regret, who questions his past decisions, who values the relationships he damaged more than the success he achieved. That's character depth that elevates Seth from good wrestler who cuts decent promos to fully realized human character who fans can emotionally invest in. But here's my concern: does WWE understand how precious this emotional honesty is, or will they immediately undercut it next week with comedy segments or by having Seth go back to his normal cocky persona? The success of this reunion plea depends entirely on WWE committing to the emotional reality Seth established and following through with appropriate storytelling rather than just using this as a one-week ratings pop before moving on to something else. If WWE treats this seriously, shows Seth genuinely struggling with whether Roman and Dean will forgive him, gives us scenes of the three men working through their issues, makes the reunion feel earned rather than instant, this could be incredible long-term storytelling. But if they just have the Shield reunite next week with no further exploration of the emotional complexity, it's a wasted opportunity. Do you think WWE will commit to exploring the emotional complexity of a Shield reunion, or will they just reunite them immediately without proper build-up? Comment your honest prediction based on WWE's track record. Let's discuss Roman Reigns' potential response, because the Tribal Chief's reaction to Seth's plea is crucial for determining where this story goes. Roman has spent the past several years establishing himself as the dominant force in WWE, building the bloodline into the most powerful faction in wrestling, and positioning himself as the undisputed head of the table who doesn't need anyone. So Seth asking Roman to reunite the Shield creates a conflict for Roman's character. Does Roman even need the Shield anymore? He's already proven he can dominate WWE without Seth and Dean. He has his own family faction that's been more successful and longer-lasting than the Shield ever was. Reuniting with Seth might feel like a step backward for Roman's character evolution. But on the other hand, there's the emotional pull of brotherhood and shared history. Roman and Seth conquered WWE together as part of the Shield. Despite the betrayal, there's a bond there that years of separation haven't completely erased. Maybe Roman recognizes that Seth's apology is genuine and decides that forgiveness is more important than holding on to decade-old grudges. Roman's response options: Option 1, immediate forgiveness. Roman accepts Seth's apology and agrees to reunite the Shield because brotherhood is more important than past mistakes. This is the emotional choice that fans would love but might feel unearned if Roman doesn't express his own feelings about the betrayal first. Option 2, conditional acceptance. Roman says he'll consider reuniting if Seth proves his loyalty through actions rather than words. Maybe Seth has to complete tasks or challenges to earn his way back into Roman's trust. This creates ongoing drama and makes the eventual reunion feel earned. Option 3, flat rejection. Roman tells Seth that the Shield is the past and the bloodline is the future. Roman has moved on, and Seth should too. This is the most character-consistent choice for the Tribal Chief but would break fans' hearts. Option 4, manipulation. Roman pretends to forgive Seth but is secretly planning to use Seth and then betray him eventually, getting revenge for the original Shield breakup. This would be dark and fascinating character work. My hope is option 2 or 4 because they create the most dramatic tension and give WWE months of storytelling rather than just immediately reuniting the Shield and moving on. The journey toward reunion should be as compelling as the reunion itself. How should Roman Reigns respond to Seth's plea? Vote for option 1, 2, 3, 4, or give your own idea for Roman's reaction. Now let's talk about Dean Ambrose/Jon Moxley because his response is even more complicated than Roman's. Dean left WWE specifically because he was frustrated with creative direction, political games, and the restrictions placed on his character. He's built an incredibly successful career as Jon Moxley in AEW and other promotions, proving he doesn't need WWE or The Shield to be a top star. So Seth asking Dean to come home might not land the way Seth hopes. Dean isn't sitting around missing WWE, he's thriving elsewhere doing exactly what he wants creatively. Why would Dean give up that freedom to return to WWE's system just because Seth feels guilty about something that happened a decade ago? Unless there's something WWE can offer Dean that AEW can't. Maybe the money is significantly better. Maybe Dean misses performing in front of 70,000 people at WrestleMania. Maybe Dean has his own regrets about leaving on bad terms and wants closure with WWE, Roman, and Seth before his career ends. Or maybe Dean's response is to essentially say, I moved on, Seth. I built something incredible without WWE. I don't need the Shield anymore. That would be a powerful statement about growth and independence that might hurt Seth but would be honest about where Dean's character is currently. The most interesting scenario is probably Dean agreeing to return but with conditions: creative control, specific opponents he wants to face, limited schedule so he can still work elsewhere. That creates a dynamic where the Shield reunion happens but Dean is operating on his own terms rather than submitting to WWE's system the way he did before. Will Dean Ambrose/Jon Moxley actually return to WWE for a Shield reunion, or has he moved on permanently? Comment whether you think he should come back or stay away. Here's my controversial take that will make people furious: WWE should not reunite the Shield because doing so prevents Roman, Seth, and Dean from continuing their individual character development and essentially admits WWE can't create compelling current storylines without relying on nostalgia. The Shield was incredible when it happened organically from 2012 to 2014, but that was over a decade ago. Wrestling has evolved. The business has changed. The fans have moved on to new favorites. Bringing back the Shield in 2025 feels like WWE saying, we know you loved this 10 years ago, so we're going to give it to you again instead of creating something new that you'll love just as much. It's the same pattern we've seen with DX reunions, NWO reunions, Evolution reunions, WWE constantly going back to the past because they don't trust their ability to build the future. Roman, Seth, and Dean have all grown as characters beyond their Shield identities. Roman is the tribal chief with the bloodline. Seth is the visionary with his own vision for WWE. Dean/Jon is the paradigm-breaking independent star who succeeds on his own terms. Putting them back in Shield gear and having them do the fist bump makes them smaller, not bigger. What WWE should do is acknowledge the Shield's history and importance while allowing Roman, Seth, and Dean to interact as the evolved versions of themselves they've become. They can be allies without being the Shield. They can team up against common enemies without wearing tactical gear and coming through the crowd. They can honor their past while living in their present. But WWE won't do that because the easy nostalgia pop is too tempting. They'll reunite the Shield, sell merchandise, get a ratings bump, and then wonder why fans eventually get bored because they've seen this story before. True creativity means building new legacies, not constantly recycling old ones. Super controversial: should the Shield stay broken up so Roman, Seth, and Dean can continue evolving individually, or should they reunite to recapture past glory? This will absolutely divide everyone. Let's address the cynical perspective because we need to acknowledge the possibility that WWE is using Shield nostalgia to distract from current creative problems. WWE's storytelling has been inconsistent lately, dropping storylines, rushing through feuds, failing to build new stars. The Shield reunion is the perfect distraction from all those problems because it generates automatic excitement and discussion without WWE having to create something original. Think about it: WWE knows that announcing a Shield reunion will dominate wrestling news for weeks, generate millions of social media interactions, spike merchandise sales, and likely improve ratings. That's valuable to a publicly traded company trying to show growth. But it's also a short-term solution that doesn't address WWE's long-term creative issues. What happens after the Shield reunion runs its course? Maybe they have a few big matches, maybe they dominate for a few months, and then what? WWE is right back where they started, except now they've burned through one of their biggest nostalgia plays. You can only reunite the Shield so many times before fans stop caring. The sustainable approach would be using Seth's heartfelt messages as a starting point for character development and new storylines rather than just leading to a simple Shield reunion. Maybe Seth's apology creates new dynamics and rivalries that don't require bringing back the exact faction from 2012. Maybe this is about growth and evolution rather than repetition and nostalgia. But I'm skeptical that WWE will take that harder, more creative path when the easy nostalgia path is right there waiting to be exploited. Time will tell whether Seth's messages lead to something meaningful or just another temporary reunion that fizzles out. Is WWE using Shield nostalgia to distract from creative problems, or is this a genuine attempt at emotional storytelling? Comment whether you're cynical or hopeful about WWE's intentions. Here's something nobody is talking about. What does a Shield reunion mean for current factions like the Bloodline and Seth's vision? Roman has spent years building the Bloodline as his family legacy. The Usos, Solo Sikoa, Jacob Fatu, they all committed to Roman's vision of family dominance. If Roman abandons that to reunite with Seth and Dean, what message does that send to his actual blood relatives? It would suggest that the Shield Brotherhood is more important to Roman than his actual family, which contradicts everything the Bloodline has represented. Or it creates an opportunity for the Bloodline to rebel against Roman, saying he's betraying family for nostalgia, leading to a Bloodline civil war that could be fascinating storytelling. Similarly, Seth has been building the Vision as his faction representing WWE's future. If he abandons that to reunite the Shield, a faction representing WWE's past, what does that say about his commitment to his current allies? It makes Seth look fickle and undermines whatever he was trying to build with the Vision. The smart move is probably integrating these storylines rather than abandoning one for the other. Maybe the Shield reunites, but it's in conflict with the Bloodline, creating a megafeud between WWE's two most iconic factions. Or maybe the Shield doesn't formally reunite, but Roman, Seth, and Dean form a temporary alliance to address a specific threat before returning to their current paths. That would be having your cake and eating it too, giving fans the Shield nostalgia moment they crave while maintaining the current storylines and character development that WWE has already invested time building. What happens to the Bloodline and the Vision if the Shield reunites? Should these factions merge, conflict, or be abandoned? Comment your booking ideas. Here's my final analysis before I need your complete thoughts. Seth Rollins sending heartfelt messages to Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose about reuniting the Shield is either WWE's most emotional and nostalgic moment that honors wrestling history while creating exciting new possibilities, or it's the most cynical use of fan nostalgia to cover up creative bankruptcy and inability to build compelling current storylines. The execution of Seth's messages was perfect, emotional, vulnerable, authentic. Seth showed genuine regret and hope in ways that made even cynical fans feel something. That's effective storytelling regardless of what comes next. But the success of this storyline depends entirely on WWE's commitment to follow through. If they use Seth's messages as the foundation for months of complex character work exploring forgiveness, trust, and whether past glory can be recaptured, this could be legendary. If they just reunite the Shield next week with no emotional depth and have them run through opponents for a few months before breaking up again, it's a wasted opportunity that damages the legacy of what the Shield originally meant. The wrestling world is divided between fans who desperately want the Shield reunion and fans who think WWE should stop living in the past. Both perspectives are valid, and WWE needs to navigate that divide carefully to satisfy both audiences. If you made it through this entire breakdown, you're amazing. Do 3 things. First, smash the like button if Seth's messages made you emotional but you're also concerned about WWE's intentions. Second, leave detailed comments answering all my questions. Genuine or manipulative? Roman's response? Dean return? Should they reunite or stay separate? Current factions' fate? Cynical or hopeful? Third, subscribe and hit that bell because this Shield reunion story is just beginning and I'm covering every emotional moment, every response, every development. This is either beautiful or cynical and we need to discover which together.